Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack a truly chilling cold case investigation. We are looking into the events documented in The Door of the Old House. Now, our narrative centers on a man named Karthik. He traveled to a small village near Hyderabad with a pretty simple goal, really. He just wanted to sell his late grandmother's house. But, as you'll see, this seemingly standard real estate transaction quickly turned into the unearthing of a dark, forgotten secret.
Okay, let's dive right into this. What would it actually take for you to spend a night in a house that the entire village fears? Karthik was deeply skeptical. While the locals held these deeply rooted, very genuine fears about this property, Karthik kind of just laughed them off. To him, these were just old village rumors, and there was absolutely no way he was going to let local superstition dictate his plans. But, those rumors were incredibly specific. The villagers would constantly whisper, "There's something wrong with that house at night." And visually, the property certainly fit the part of a dreaded local landmark. The source material describes it as completely lifeless. It was surrounded by these giant looming trees. The windows were all broken, and the rooms inside were covered in these thick, undisturbed layers of dust. So, the absolutely crucial point to remember here is that this house had sat completely abandoned for 5 years. That's 5 whole years of total isolation and decay before Karthik arrived and boldly decided to stay there, entirely alone, completely dismissing the unsettling stories that were circulating through the village.
Now, the events we're analyzing really kick off late into the evening. At around 11 p.m., the environment outside took a dramatic turn. A heavy rain started pouring down. We're talking about a severe storm where those broken windows shook violently and thunder was echoing loudly through the empty, dusty house. Meanwhile, Karthik was just sitting downstairs, casually scrolling through videos on his phone, entirely unaware of what was about to happen.
Then, that isolation was abruptly broken by a sudden, unmistakable sound. Thud. Slow, heavy footsteps started echoing from the floor directly above him.
Thud. Karthik instantly froze in his tracks, and honestly, as you can imagine, sitting alone in an abandoned house during a thunderstorm, your mind just races to find a logical, safe explanation. He muttered to himself that the noise was probably just rats scurrying in the old floorboards. Thud. But the footsteps absolutely continued, and they didn't sound like rats. They were slow, they were heavy, and they sounded exactly as if someone, or something, was deliberately walking across the upstairs floor. Realizing he couldn't just ignore it anymore, Karthik grabbed a flashlight and slowly, very cautiously, made his way up the stairs. Karthik slowly pushes open the slightly ajar door to the only room upstairs. Inside, he finds a chilling contrast. He sees things you might totally expect in an abandoned house: an old chair, a cracked mirror, and strange, unsettling scratch marks covering the walls. But then he spots a glaring anomaly: a pair of tiny children's shoes. And the crazy thing is, they looked brand new. It's an anomaly that completely clashes with a house left entirely to rot for half a decade. A strange, undeniable fear really began to creep into Karthik's chest. As Karthik turned to leave the room, his flashlight caught something in that cracked mirror. He saw the clear reflection of a little girl. She was wearing a white dress, and she had long black hair that completely covered her face. Karthik spun around instantly to face the room, but nobody was there. His hands started trembling. He tried to tell himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him in the dark, and he made a panicked, hurried run back downstairs. But the psychological pressure was only escalating. Just as he reached the ground floor, a soft laugh echoed right behind him. Ha ha ha. At that exact moment, the power went out completely. The entire house was plunged into pitch-black darkness. And out of that heavy darkness came a little girl's voice. "Brother." Karthik, who was now absolutely terrified, slowly pointed his flashlight toward the hallway. Standing right at the end of the hall was the little girl, but this time her face was visible. Tears were rolling down her cheeks as she whispered, "Why did they leave me here?" Karthik shouted into the dark, desperately demanding to know, "Who are you?" The apparition didn't answer with words. She simply raised her hand and pointed toward the wall. Karthik moved the beam of his flashlight to illuminate what she was pointing at. It was an old photograph hanging right there on the wall, a picture of his grandmother standing right beside a little girl. And this brilliantly illustrates how the disparate pieces of this cold case violently slammed together in Karthik's mind. Written below that photograph was a name and year, Swati, 2008. Seeing this timeline triggered a flood of Karthik's childhood memories. Years ago, a little girl from the village named Swati had mysteriously disappeared. Nobody had ever found her. Then, 5 years ago, the house was abandoned. And now, today, Karthik is literally face-to-face with an apparition matching her exact description. Right as this horrific realization hit him, a massive, deafening sound erupted from the room upstairs. Bang! And in an instant, the girl completely vanished from the hallway. Let's move along and see how this builds. Because gathering an immense amount of courage, Karthik realized he had to return upstairs to the source of the noise. He noticed fresh cracks on the floorboards that definitely hadn't been obvious before. So he grabbed an iron rod and started forcefully breaking the floor open. After several minutes of prying and digging through the wood, he discovered a small hidden box buried underneath, and finally, he opened it to read the diary inside. The physical evidence pulled from beneath those floorboards was sparse, but it was deeply significant. Inside that buried box was just an old doll and a diary. These became the crucial, untouched artifacts of this suddenly very active cold case, holding the buried answers to a mystery the village had basically given up on years ago. With trembling hands, Karthik opened the diary to its final page. The entry read, "I'm scared. They locked me in this room." Reading those terrifying last words, Karthik's body went completely cold. The physical environment reacted as well. A freezing wind suddenly blew right behind him in that enclosed, drafty upstairs room. Then the little girl's voice whispered one final plea into the freezing air. "Please give me justice." That undeniable, whispered plea was the final catalyst. It prompted Karthik to leave the house and go straight to the police the very next morning to report exactly what he had uncovered beneath the floorboards.
Here is how this agonizing cold case finally resolved. Karthik informed the police, which directly led to an official excavation beneath the room. This resulted in the grim discovery of Swati's remains, completely shocking the entire village, who had lived with the agonizing mystery of her disappearance for years. Finally, proper funeral rituals were performed for her soul. And the ultimate outcome of bringing this truth to light? After that day, nobody ever heard footsteps in the old house again.
So what does this all mean? Well, it brings us to a final, provocative thought to close out today's explainer. How many other abandoned places hold secrets just waiting to be heard? This story powerfully underscores our deep human desire for closure, and it reminds us that forgotten history has a way of demanding to be brought into the light, even years later. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the evidence in this unsettling cold case. I hope this structured look at the facts helped illuminate the narrative, and I really encourage you to keep questioning the forgotten stories in the world around you.
Like, share and subscribe for more videos.